Welcome, you're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Claudia Czerwinska. French President Emmanuel Macron met with Donald Trump in Washington to discuss the most burning issues, including peace talks and European peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. As this took place, Europe is bracing for what could be a new era of European defense without the U.S. Joining me now to discuss the latest developments is Elisabeth Braw, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Welcome to the program, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
So Emmanuel Macron, as I just mentioned, made his way to Washington. He spoke to Trump. Do you think that he managed to make a difference on Trump's stance around the issues of EU security and the situation in Ukraine?
Well, it's difficult to know with Trump because he changes his mind quite often. And what seems to have been the case is that Macron at least managed to put a face and some goodwill into a face on the European Union, on those countries that Trump particularly likes to dislike and sometimes hate. And he also managed to, I think, put some ideas into Trump's head about what can be some possible steps regarding Ukraine that don't involve selling out Ukraine. Now, we don't know how much those ideas will stick, because somebody else can walk into Trump's office today and tell him the opposite. And that is where we are. Trump has a history of taking completely different positions on different days of the month or indeed of the week. So let's see what he says in a few days' time, when Macron's words will have been superseded or added to by other interlocutors.
How do you assess Emmanuel Macron's sort of performance, I would say, during the meeting with Donald Trump, considering he had to put a very strong stance when it comes to those issues?
It was a masterful performance. Before Macron arrived, Trump had spent many days and weeks and months speaking ill of Europe, minimizing what Europe is doing for Ukraine, unfairly minimizing what Europe is doing for Ukraine, considering Europe has given Ukraine more support than has the United States. So Macron had to go to Washington to essentially try to correct the record, while also not making Trump feel bad about himself, or feeling that Macron was correcting the record, because he would have reacted badly to that. Macron did extremely well. He flattered Trump. He was humorous. He did this bromance thing that he does so well. And I think the result was Trump being much less adversarial towards the European Union, towards America's European allies, than he had been before. The question is whether that feeling will stick.
Part of the discussion revolved around a possible trade war and the tariffs on both sides of the Atlantic. And we heard from Mr. Macron, who said, I quote, "Come on, you cannot have a trade war with China and Europe at the same time," end quote. He said that on Fox News in an interview after the meeting with Donald Trump. Do you think that Mr. Trump is actually going to listen to this interview on Fox News and actually take note of that?
Well, he does listen to Fox News, and we should remember he has hired not just one, but two talking heads from Fox News for senior posts in his administration. So he does pay a lot of attention to Fox News.
But is he going to listen to the message, is the question.
That is indeed the question. And we should remember that appealing to economic arguments, as Macron did, pointing out quite rightly that it's unwise to have trade wars against two major trading blocs at the same time, China and the European Union, that would be unwise. That is a quite different question from what it is that Trump wants to communicate to his voters. He wants to communicate to his voters that he is fighting the ills of globalization, and he is fighting the countries and the entities such as the European Union that he feels are benefiting from trade, at the expense of America. And it's very hard to make the economic argument to voters or those who feel that America has been unfairly treated by its trading partners, simply because the economic arguments are quite complicated, whereas the argument where you say, well, America has been unfairly treated, that is a very easy argument to make. So I think it's fair to doubt whether Macron's interview on Fox will have the desired effect. But that said, well done him for going on Fox, for not just talking to the media outlets in America that might be more inclined to agree with his point of view. Fox is not inclined to agree with his point of view, and he went on Fox anyway to make sure that as many people as possible in the Trump camp and among Trump supporters at least got a chance to hear his arguments.
So in a few days' time, there's going to be a meeting, a defense-focused meeting of EU leaders taking place in London. We're going to have a briefing, a sort of a summit where we're going to hear from Mr. Macron. The leaders are going to hear from Mr. Macron to talk about what's next. What do you think Europe has in store after the conversations that are taking place? Let us not forget that, for example, Kaja Kallas is also speaking to Marco Rubio today. So this is something that definitely should be considered. How is Europe going to respond?
Well, I can tell you the markets have already made their predictions about how Europe will respond. European defense companies' stocks are up considerably, whereas American defense stocks are down. Who would have thought? But this is where we are at the moment. People are betting, the markets are betting on increased defense spending, not just betting, but are counting on significantly increased defense spending in Europe. So that means considerably more income, more revenues, more contracts for European defense contractors. And that comes at the same time as Trump has said he wants to slash the Pentagon's budget, and not just he has said, Pete Hegseth is slashing the Pentagon. So unsurprisingly, US defense stocks are down. It is an extraordinary development, but one that will clearly benefit many European employers and indeed the labor market in Europe in the specialized field of defense manufacturing.
After the Sunday elections, parliamentary elections taking place in Germany, we've heard from the incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who said, I quote, "We must prepare for the worst case scenario, one in which American engagement in European security significantly declines," end quote. Considering this quote and the general feeling among European leaders and on the continent, do you think that we are approaching a new era when it comes to European defense? And is actually Europe ready for such a possibility taking place without the U.S. possibly involved in the picture?
Well, it's undeniable that the U.S. has changed its position radically in the past month, past few weeks. And we saw that, for example, in the UN votes on Ukraine that took place in the past couple of days, where the US, United States voted with Russia against Ukraine, against its European allies, an extraordinary turn of events. But when it comes to how our European leaders are reacting, I think it is so indicative to see Friedrich Merz, the winner of the German election, who is not just a Christian Democrat, but one of the most pro-American politicians in German politics. He has spent his whole career in politics advocating for the transatlantic partnership. To hear him say, as he did a couple of days ago, just after the election, hear him say, we in Europe have to think about becoming more independent from the United States. That is such a sign of the times, and he is not saying it lightly, because he is a big friend of and fan and supporter of the transatlantic alliance. But it's not up to us Europeans to decide how that goes. A decision has been made in Washington to change the nature of the transatlantic alliance, and we can see European leaders now picking up the pieces very quickly and trying to reconstitute European defense in particular in some fashion. It's not going to happen quickly, simply because defense manufacturing is not quick. It's hard to expand your armed forces. You have to find the troops somewhere, you have to train them, you have to train the trainers, but it is beginning to happen.
Definitely a lot happening. Hopefully we will be coming to some conclusions very soon, considering this latest meeting in Washington. Thank you so much, Elisabeth Braw. Lovely to have you on the show again, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks, but we have a news bulletin coming in just a moment, so please do stay tuned.